My name is Andrew and I'm a third year undergraduate student at the University of Cambridge, St John's College. I'm about to read the personal statement that got me in, so stay tuned if you want to level up your application. My first bit of advice before we dive in is for the personal statement, this is essentially an essay where you're explaining to the university, this is why you should accept me to study this subject at a university level. So make sure that every single line of your statement is relevant to this. We will probably touch on this later on when we discuss whether it is appropriate to include extracurricular activities such as sports or societies within the statement. If you're about to submit your personal statement and you find yourself in the situation where you've just got too many characters, think, does this specific line or this specific clause show why I am a good candidate to study my subject at university? If not, then it's got to go. So let's start by reading the introduction. But just for context, my course is Modern and Medieval Languages, which basically means French and Spanish. I've got a link of my personal statement, just the text, in a Google Doc in the comments, so click down below if you want to see the whole thing and how it's formatted, rather than just seeing it line by line. Being immersed in another culture on my first French exchange to La Rochelle in 2018 was a pivotal moment as I discovered the joy of authentically communicating in a foreign language. Both the language and the culture had a significant impact on my determination to pursue languages. The four main points about the introduction is that it should be short and sweet, honest, related to your course, and it is optional. It needs to be short and sweet because you have time in the rest of the statement to get into really meaty points about your passion for your subject. The introduction should be honest, and it could be based on an experience that first made you realize how much you really enjoyed this subject. So for example, this trip made me realize that French was so much more than a subject at school. It was allowing me to understand other cultures, to communicate with other people, and it was so much more than just learning verb conjugations. It also directly addresses the Cambridge course, or the courses of the universities that I was applying to. So out of the universities that I was interested in, I realized that about half the courses were to do with language, so that means translation, or maybe writing or speaking the language, and the rest was to do with culture, so that might be philosophy, literature, media, anything like that. Therefore, when I mention both the language and the culture inspiring me to study languages, I'm sort of giving a wink to the admissions teams of all the universities that I'm applying to and saying, hey, I've done my research and I know that studying languages at university isn't just like Duolingo. Like I said, this introduction can be optional because you might want to still gather up all your points together at the end and you don't want to repeat yourself. So if you're looking to get rid of characters, then I would get rid of the introduction. You can just start with the first point. My first meaty paragraph starts like this. My love of language learning led me to read Gabrielle Weiner's Fluent Forever, which used neuroscience to explain the most efficient way to learn a language. His spaced repetition system has revolutionized the way that I study. Furthermore, the absence of a teacher during lockdown meant that I had to take ownership of my own learning. Influenced by Weiner, I regularly call a Spanish friend to improve my conversational competence. In this paragraph, I'm showing the admissions team that I am an independent learner, which is obviously a key skill for university study. The personal statement is a great place to show how your passion for this subject goes beyond simply what you've learned at school. And this is applicable for every subject, by the way. Say you study biology and there's an experiment you did in class and you found it really interesting. You don't have to have access to the best labs in the world and then do incredible work experience to be able to write about that in your personal statement. You can simply look up an article or watch a YouTube video, do an online MOOC or an open university course about something that interests you. So say, I don't know, topic 3 interests you. What's the theme in topic 3 that really interests you? Do some more reading about that. Then, if possible, maybe try and link that to a course. Then talk about how this skill or this topic is something that you'd like to learn a lot more about at university. Additionally, if you're an Oxbridge candidate and an Oxbridge humanities candidate, the personal statement is most likely going to form the basis of one of or all of your interview. This means that you actually have to have read the books that you mention and be ready to talk more about them. So when I mention a system that revolutionized the way I study, I don't have enough space in the personal statement to mention exactly what happened and to detail all the ways in which I'm very smart about my language learning. However, when the interview came around, I was ready to talk about that if I needed to, and it was something I did. I won't bore you with the details, but if you're interested in more videos or content about how I learn languages or how I maintain several languages as a polyglot, then let me know in the comments. Moving on to the second part of this paragraph. During this time of educational freedom, I explored the theme of fantasy in Spanish literature and cinema, inspired by El laberinto del fauno. I found it interesting to compare Marquez and Del Toro's use of magical realism in Crónica de una muerte anunciada and El laberinto del fauno, respectively. Del Toro never reveals if the magical world is fantastical or real, yet in Marquez's work there is no such ambiguity. The way these alternative approaches to the supernatural provided different visions of the world inspired me to question the nature of reality. So overall, the structure of my personal statement is something like this. We've got a short introduction, then a Spanish section because I'm applying for French and Spanish, and then I link the second half of the personal statement to the French side of the course, and then I briefly mention my extracurriculars and do a short conclusion at the end. The conclusion is only one line. As we've seen previously, the first big paragraph talks about the way I learn languages, and now I'm flowing into my Spanish part. So when I say, during this time of educational freedom, I'm not only talking about the pandemic in quite a positive way, I'm linking my interest between the language aspect of the course and the literature and culture and cinema aspect of the course. And I managed to mention this reading in a rather sophisticated way. El laberinto del fauno was one of my set texts for A-level Spanish, but Crónica de una muerte anunciada was not. It's okay to mention things from class that have interested you in your personal statement. It doesn't have to be all research and reading you've done outside of class time. Also bear in mind that this is probably the 6th or 5th draft of my personal statement. That was quite a lot. Some people only do 1 or 2, but I thought a lot about how I was going to link the texts. So to be completely honest, what I did is I just started reading books I'd been recommended or books that I found interesting, authors that I'd heard about, and I started reading other works by Marquez, but I just found it too difficult. It was a very long book. There was some very difficult themes. The Spanish was really complicated, and I thought, no, I'm just going to focus on something that actually interests me more. So I chose something that was simpler, but that's completely okay. Just be honest about what interests you. So another tip for the Oxbridge candidates, as something that I did, is that when I was preparing for the interview, I wrote out each line of the personal statement in my notebook, and then I just kind of mind mapped what I meant by that in the personal statement. Because sometimes you can use quite flowery language and you're obviously trying to keep things as concise as possible, but you have to really stand by these statements that you make. So when I compare the theme of magical realism between two works, do I know exactly what magical realism is? And I need to think when I'm mind mapping, how are these two things represented differently? What am I going to say if I'm asked about this in the interview? Obviously, if you're not applying to Oxbridge, don't worry about that. There's no need to do any interview prep. My second paragraph carries on about my interest in Spanish culture. In my entry to the St. John's poster competition that won Best Presentation, I wrote a 2,100 word analysis in Spanish that examined Del Toro's use of magical realism, as well as the role of women in Hispanic literature and cinema, a theme that fascinated me while studying Como Agua para Chocolate. The start of this paragraph underlines another supracurricular activity that I've done, and it shows that I'm an independent learner and I'm really interested about the subject. Do not worry, however, if you've not won any competitions. In my opinion, the most interesting thing about this section is, once again, my comparison. It's the way that I was able to think, this theme is really interesting in this work, and I'm going to compare it to another work which is not really related, but it shows that I can think outside the box. So once again, do not worry if you've not won any national competitions. Show that you're an independent learner, but more importantly, show why you are appropriate for this course. Do your research into the course that you want to study. What are the main skills that the university wants to see? And obviously you're not just applying to one university, but to 5, and this means that don't make it too specific to one university's course. And don't worry, because each university knows that you're applying to 4 other universities. They won't expect it to be written specifically for them. I would not recommend saying, I look forward to studying this paper at Cambridge, or whichever university is your favourite. So you have to make the personal statement a bit more general so it fits all of the universities you're applying for, but I'm assuming that all the courses will be pretty similar. It's not like you're going to be applying for astrophysics at one university, Chinese at another university, French and Spanish at another university. All courses will be pretty much the same and offer pretty similar courses, so not really something to worry about. The rest of the paragraph goes as follows. Esquivel uses Tita as a strong female lead to subvert power structures through magical realism. I drew similarities between Tita and Adela from La Casa de Bernarda Alba, as both explore the journey to female emancipation in an oppressive Hispanic society. The role of women in Lorca's work intrigued me, so I studied it for my IRP. Understanding Lorca's persecution due to his homosexuality lends poignancy to this theme of subjugation. So a lot of the statements that I'm making about the extra reading that I've done read like they're from an essay. You might be thinking, Andrew, previously you said that every single line needs to be showing the admissions teams why you deserve a spot at their university. And here I'm doing that indirectly, because I'm not saying I'm really good at Spanish, I'm really good at French. I'm showing that by the reading I've done and the comparisons that I'm making. So they're not very common ways to interpret the text, in my opinion, and I think of this personal statement as a bit of a river because it's flowing from theme to theme. So we've talked quite a lot about magical realism within Hispanic texts, and then we're moving to how gender and femininity interacts with this theme. Then I'm taking a step back and I'm saying this interested me so much that actually I'm using this work that I did outside of school for something inside of school, which is the IRP. And then I'm taking another step back when I say that the fact that Lorca was gay makes me understand this text even more. So you've got to think of what you want to say and write it down however you want. And then after that, try and make it more concise because obviously we've not got many characters. And then think about how you could say it in a more academic manner. Let's now look into my first paragraph about the French side of the course. To cultivate my understanding of French literature, I began by reading Le Petit Prince. I analysed Saint-Exupéry's exploration of complex philosophical issues from the simple viewpoint of a child in an essay for a school essay competition. Again, here I'm being completely honest. So if you guys don't know this text, The Small Prince, it's written for children and it's very, very simple. So do not just try and show you are smart by mentioning very complicated texts. Especially if you're an Oxbridge candidate, they will see through this interview, so just be honest about what interests you. Furthermore, I've enjoyed comparing Pangloss's optimism in Candide and Meursault's beliefs in absurdist atheism in L'Étranger. I became captivated by the widespread censorship of Candide, so I explored this theme further in my IRP on secularism, why the religious freedom of French citizens is arguably censored. This reading enlightened me as to the importance of the exploration of philosophical questions in French literature. I'm looking forward to deepening my understanding of French philosophy during my degree. So we have a lot to comment on here. Once again, we have a sentence that compares and contrasts characters, themes, and ideas. And by this point in the video, you've probably realized that I sort of had a pattern that I followed, which is have extra reading, this other extra reading, and compare them. Or maybe something that I studied in class and then compare it to something I've read or looked at outside of class. And this works really well. One thing I might say about this statement is that I did mention a lot of set texts. This did get a bit stressful when I came around to interview time and I had to prepare what I would say about all of these set texts and reread them all. It was a lot of work. I don't think that this was necessary. I think that I could have been just as successful with my personal statement if I'd perhaps mentioned less set texts and talk more about what I mean exactly. So when I mention the comparison between one character's optimism in one book and then Meursault's beliefs in absurdist atheism in L'Étranger, I could have maybe done one more sentence about what I compared and how they were different rather than just moving on to another thing. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this personal statement. Obviously, it got me into Cambridge, but I think I could have also written an equally good personal statement by mentioning less texts. Do not be startled or frightened by the amount of things I've done outside of school. The most important thing is to show your passion and to show, like I said, why you would be a good candidate to study the subject at university. A quite forward statement from this paragraph is the comparison of the censorship of a book to the censorship of the religious freedom of French citizens. So it is a comparison between something within the literary realm and present day France. Don't make statements like this without knowing what you're saying. Here I was talking about the banning of headscarves in public places in France. I think the originality of this sentence and of this comparison shows that it was really me who'd written it, and obviously this was backed up by being able to defend this point of view or discuss this point of view at interview. One more detail, which in my opinion was the cherry on the cake, was using the word enlightened. So I said, this reading enlightened me as to the importance of the exploration of philosophical questions. By using the word enlightened, I am referencing the 17th and 18th century intellectual movement in Europe. The final sentence about looking forward to studying similar things in my degree is really great because it shows that I know I'm going to be studying harder things and I'm ready for this challenge. The final paragraph, which is directly about the degree, is as follows. Furthermore, a prominent theme in French culture and literature that I discovered was identity, shown in Entre les Murs through the character of Esmeralda, who says she is French but not proud of it, La Haine, in which gang culture is a crucial part of the protagonist's identity, and in Nous et Moi, where homelessness is an integral part of No's identity. I also enjoy watching foreign language television and films such as Jonah, 120 beats per minute, Elite, and Que coño está pasando. I don't have much else to comment about this paragraph. It's pretty much doing what we've seen beforehand, so it's commenting other things I've read and seen that are to do with my degree, and talk about why this shows my passion for languages. So talking about film and TV shows that I've watched shows the admissions teams that I'm aware that part of a languages degree is media and it's film, and I can situate why my subject is relevant in the modern day. Like I said previously, in my personal statement, I mentioned a lot of set texts, a lot of extra reading, a lot of extra viewing, a lot of extra research, and I think it is a lot. I think it's a strong personal statement, but like I said, you don't need to include all this. Year 13 Andrew, you can calm down a bit. You can include, Year 13 Andrew, you can calm down. You can include a few more sentences explaining these statements, and you don't always have to include comparison, 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 comparison. This is my conclusion paragraph. My love of the creative arts extends to its physical expression. Since 2017, I have been training with the Centre of Advanced Training in ballet, contemporary, and creative dance for 3 to 4 days a week alongside my studies. This has taught me time management skills and enabled me to cope well under pressure. So, for context, from years 10 to 13, I did exactly that. I did about 12 hours of school lessons a week, and I had 12 hours of dance lessons a week. You might not think that this sentence is relevant for the personal statement, but I would disagree. I've managed to link my love of languages to my love of dance, and I'm giving the admissions team a bit of a better idea about who I am. I also linked the fact that I was doing so much outside of school and still managed to excel academically. I also showed which skills I gained from this that are relevant to university study. So, obviously, since I had so many dance classes outside of school, I had to learn to get homework done quickly and to prioritize tasks. I mentioned this in the sentence where I talk about my time management skills and coping under pressure. Clearly, two very important skills when you're studying a degree at Oxford or Cambridge. We can see here that all my non-academic references link back to why I'm an ideal candidate for a top university. Notice, however, that I don't mention, this is why I'd be good for Cambridge. You don't want to directly mention the university that you're applying to, because as I said before, you're applying to 5 universities. Carrying on. Additionally, I enjoy taking on responsibilities. Tutoring a Year 7 student and taking on the roles of senior prefect and deputy head of house have given me the sense of satisfaction that comes from being responsible for the learning and well-being of others. So I think this is not 100% necessary, but it's a nice touch. Here we're showing that I'm a model student and that I do things outside of studying, but we've already shown that by referencing my dance, and it doesn't necessarily show why I'd be great for university study. So I'm referencing activities that aren't really related to my degree. If you have space, add it. If not, then I think it'd probably be better to add one more sentence about your subject or a comparison, something like that. As I said, if I needed to get rid of a sentence, this would be the one to go. And if you've got space, by all means, write about your other responsibilities at school, but it's not necessary. The final line is, through attaining fluency in French and Spanish, I'm eager to gain an understanding of the culture, thought, and literature of France and Spain. So I think a pretty good formula for the conclusion is, if I do blah, 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 it will help me with blah, 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 blah. Although I don't directly mention Cambridge, I talk about the main aspects of the course, so that is the culture, thought, and literature. The conclusion should not be too long because you don't want to repeat things that you've already said earlier on in the statement. Just to wrap up this video, here's a few resources that I would recommend. So, number one is that when I was writing my personal statement, I saw a very good video from Ibsmo, which was super helpful and explained the same sort of things, how to write a personal statement. I really enjoyed his video because he collected loads of personal statements from his friends at Cambridge, and they're from all different sorts of subjects. This means that if you look in the description of his video, you'll be able to see personal statements from successful Oxbridge candidates, and there might even be some from your course. Remember that the personal statement is not the only thing that universities take into account when they're deciding whether to give you an offer or not, so they'll also take into account the references that your teachers have written about you. They will also take in your grades into account, bearing in mind what the average grades are at your school. Also, if you are an Oxbridge candidate, you have the interview and the admissions tests. But do not worry if your personal statement is not completely perfect, just do the best you can. Feel free to leave any questions about Cambridge or university in the comments below. And if you got to this point in the video, then I'd really appreciate it if you could give me a thumbs up or subscribe. It really helps my channel grow. Thank you so much. Bye.